Hot Springs Village Inside Out is a closer look at the greatness of Hot Springs Village, Arkansas and the surrounding areas. People, places, experiences. Hot Springs Village is one of the most beautiful places on earth. Join me, Randy Cantrell, and my co-host Dennis Simpson as we engage in weekly conversations to explore Hot Springs Village Inside Out. Today's show is brought to you by Central Arkansas's favorite radio station, KVRE. Find them on the dial at 92.9 FM. Stream them live at kvre.com. RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village. The award-winning RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village is the largest real estate office inside the village with over 30 full-time agents and support staff. Visit them to learn more about this beautiful place to solve your real estate needs. Call them today at 1-800-364-9007. Find them online at explorehsv.com. They are RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village at 1-800-364-9007 or online at explorehsv.com. Ike Eisenhower State Farm. Ike and his award-winning team have been serving the insurance needs of folks all around Hot Springs Village since 1998. Ike has qualified for State Farm's President's Club, Chairman's Circle, and Hot Springs Village Insurance Agent of the Year. Call Ike Eisenhower State Farm today at 501-984-4100. That's 501-984-4100. Find them online at ikeeisenhower.net. Call them today for all your insurance needs because, like a good neighbor, Ike Eisenhower State Farm is there.
Here today with Mr. James Wilborn. James, what do you do at Lake Ouachita State Park?
Dennis, I'm the park superintendent at Lake Ouachita State Park, just east of, on the east end of Lake Ouachita, and have been here for many years.
Define many real quick.
Well, I started here in 1990. So
whoa, Hector was a pup back then, wasn't he?
It was, yes. Village was growing. I think they were building a house a day back then when I first came to the Hot Springs area. Of course, I came from Benton, so I'm a local boy.
Well, you know, the funny thing is that you and I have more in common than we thought. I'm actually from Benton, Arkansas, Benton also. My parents were over on Scott-Salem over by Congo. So, yeah, we were on the rural Burbia side of Benton, if you know what I mean. So we've got a picture pulled up here real quick, and I want to go through the Lake Ouachita State Park, and then I want to come back and chat more about you real quick. But this looks like Hernando de Soto.
Yeah, I always like to, start back when we start talking about the history there, because, and particularly with the village, it has such a De Soto flair to it. But Hernando de Soto was an expedition or a explorer from Spain in 1539 that came to the Arkansas area. There's no evidence that he necessarily visited Hot Springs. He was looking for gold, as most Spaniards were at that time. And I'm sure the Native Americans said there's some really cool hot water nearby, but he said, is there gold there? And they said, no, but some really cool hot water. But his journals and the people from his expedition may have traveled to this area. They were actually trying to go into Texas a little bit at one time. And it's actually believed that De Soto passed away or died from a disease on the Mississippi River, maybe in Arkansas, on the Arkansas side, still unsure.
It's kind of like Genghis Khan, and to me, if Genghis Khan was all the places that people said he was, if De Soto went all the places, he would have lived 3 or 4 lives, because everybody wants, Mississippi wants to claim De Soto, Louisiana wants to claim De Soto, and the background behind the Coopers naming this was that there was a lot of those influences here, but. So I guess for me, I mean, and we're talking about Hot Springs. So to the outside listener, the 5 Mile High view, it's easy to kind of bundle Hot Springs and Lake Ouachita, but not always, right?
Right. Well, and we're going to talk a little about Three Sister Springs, which is why the state park is located where it is. But, the Hot Springs themselves were a big draw for lots of reasons. And the second expedition into Louisiana Clark, which was called the Hunter and Dunbar expedition. Everybody knows Lewis and Clark went in first into Louisiana Purchase, but the second expedition was called the Hunter and Dunbar expedition that actually came from New Orleans up to the hot springs area and wrote extensively about the springs and what was going on in this region.
What year would that be roughly?
1803, roughly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. So it was being, and you and I know it was referred to by a lot of the locals. It was the Valley of the Vapors. And if you've ever been there on a cooler morning, it is a valley and the vapors, I mean, it's a foggy place all the time. But, we started building the area around it with the three lakes, the Tri Lakes area, Lake Ouachita, Lake Hamilton, Lake Catherine. And where did we get the idea to actually, okay, well, let's make a state park here and why?
Well, let me back up and take you a little farther back into history. In the 1880s, the first survey was done along the Ouachita River by the Corps of Engineers. And the survey determined that the river dropped in elevation pretty drastically from Blakely Mountain Dam, where our dam is, down to Malvern, Arkansas. And so either you had a roaring river or you had a trickle. And so they determined you needed to control flooding, but they also said no one lives there. So, because in the 1880s, if you lived anywhere in their country, you were a farmer, and that's how you made your living. If you tried to farm this land, if you had to farm on your land there in the village, it would be rough going. And so it wasn't until the turn of the century when power generation became important and people were converting to electricity that a man named Harvey Couch, the founder of Arkansas Power and Light Company, built Lake Catherine in the 1920s and named it after his daughter, and then went on to build Lake Hamilton. Those two lakes are privately owned, and Lake Ouachita is not. I'll get to that as well.
Well, and you touched on that real quick. You made a great point. At Harvey Couch, who huge influence on all of Arkansas, but Lake Catherine, which has a state park also, and then Lake Hamilton, which I hear tell if they get any busier on summer weekends, they're going to install traffic lights on the lake. I've heard that, but I don't know. It's just a rumor, right?
It is.
So
It's
those are
pretty busy.
it is pretty busy. Where I was going with that is that those two lakes are privately controlled by APNL or Entergy nowadays, but the upstream water, which is Lake Ouachita from Blakely Mountain, of course, Blakely Mountain Dam, which is an amazing facility in its own right, an engineering marvel in those days. I can't imagine surveying in 1883 with ropes and metal bars and no GPS and yeah. But that said, how did we get to Lake Ouachita being a federal lake, I guess you would call it, and then a couple of private lakes behind that?
Well, Harvey Couch had finished Lake Hamilton in 1935. And in 1935, the federal government actually went to him and said, we will give you 82,000 acres of the Ouachita National Forest if you'll build Lake called the Upper Lake. And of course, he was excited about doing that. He just had a little bit of a challenge. He had to raise, I think, $31 million back then. And in 1935, raising that kind of money was pretty difficult. Of course, the government was trying to get people back to work. And so they were trying to encourage different ways to get projects going and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, Mr. Couch couldn't raise the capital or couldn't get the project started. So in 1944, the federal government said, you really haven't done anything with this proposed project. We're going to give it to the Army Corps of Engineers. And so the Army Corps of Engineers took over the project and started it in 1948. Between 1948 and 1955, they built Blakely Mountain Dam and acquired, the land that would be within the floodplain of the project. So that's why it's a core project, and the two lower lakes are privately owned.
1948, what would have been around there? There were some farm homesteads. And by the way, people, I always joke with people, it's a good thing that Hot Springs Village is beautiful because the only thing it grows is rocks. That's about all we get, right?
Right. Well, the two towns that were displaced, and I'll use the term town loosely, they were logging communities. They were Cedar Glades and Buckville. Buckville's better known. It was the smaller of the two. I want to say a population of about 15 in Buckville and maybe 30 at Cedar Glades. But most of the area was just very small, some farming along the river valley or along the Ouachita River itself. And that sort of stuff. But timber was the primary form of business or stuff in the area at that time.
Transportation was a very tough problem too. I'll make note. My wife's great great grandfather was buried at Buckville, and apparently, and I'm using quotation marks, the rich people got their graves moved out from under the lake as it was born, and then the poorer people, us, her great great grandfather is still under Lake Ouachita, as it were.
Well, and I'm not sure exactly the dynamics around the cemetery at Buckville that was relocated. I'm sure that was part of the project. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Part of the project back then. The cemetery was relocated from Buckville, and that's why the Buckville is better known of the recreation areas. But there are actually 20 recreational areas along Lake Ouachita, so there's lots of access points and stuff. It's a large lake, 48,000 acres, 4 or 5 miles long. It's pretty good size.
It's a monster. Just questioning real quick. We have the Arsenic Springs pulled up here. Now, is that in Hot Springs or is that in the area?
That was in Hot Springs. I was going to talk briefly about, the hot springs before I got into the springs here at the park. The Hot Springs area really had its heyday in the 1920s, 1910 to 1930 probably. But as early as the 1860s, 70s, and 80s, people would go to the hot springs to cure a variety of ailments. Shortly after the Civil War. Yeah, well,
right.
Right. The theory was that the water you put into your body, since most of your body's made up of water, had a direct impact on your health. And and it wasn't something you would do just once. You would spend several months taking 2 or 3 baths a day to soak and allow that minerals or the water to heal you of whatever your ailment is, whether that's kidneys or whatever, digestive.
And that radon gas to get in your system, right?
Well, they used a lot of things that today we would say, nah, I'm not sure we do that today. But back then that was what was drawing people to the area were the springs.
Well, and a lot of people that don't know the area, once again, the 5 Mile High View, the Fordyce Bathhouse is obviously, to me, the grandest bathhouse by far and away, and it is the one that is the visitor center to the national park. Is it the second or third level that they have the mercury bath? Because we all know how good mercury is for you. And then beneath that, they had some of the other springs and so forth. So it was believed that these waters, understandably, would make you better. And a lot of people don't understand that the upper levels of the Fordyce Bathhouse were basically hotel rooms that you would stay at. And you would get a pass that you would go for 7 days. And if you went for 7 days and you could walk over the mountain to Gulf of Gorge and back, you were cured. And I have walked that, James, and I promise you would be cured if you could walk that.
They have some pretty neat stuff there in the Fordyce.
Yeah.
Well, the theory behind Three Sister Springs or McFadden's Springs in the 1870s, a gentleman named McFadden found the springs here at the state park. This long before the lake, and he homesteaded it. Back then, if you stayed on land for 7 years and took care of it and stuff, it became yours in essence. And he apparently named the springs. The theory is that the springs were named after his 3 daughters. Unfortunately, we don't know what their names were or anything like that, but that's where the name Three Sisters comes from. And they have done, tests on each of the springs that show that they have different mineral content. So they believe that they're from 3 separate sources, but they surface basically at the same place, which is kind of interesting. But the theory was, yeah, let's go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm not just interesting, but it's fascinating that they literally come out, number one, roughly at the same place, and number 2, they come out, I don't know, 5 to 6 feet above or below what is now the lake. So it's hard to look at. I mean, I know, and there were a lot of old buildings there, or buildings that were new at the time. But I mean, if there wasn't a lake there, this would be 30 miles in the middle of nowhere, right?
Well, it was 12 miles north of Hot Springs, so it was a little bit of a travel for the day. But a man named Mr. Whipple kind of took over the springs in 1907, and between 1910 and 1930, which was the heyday of the springs in Hot Springs, the theory was that if Hot Springs could cure you, surely some cold water springs 12 miles north of there could carry you too. And so he built a small resort, which had some cabins which you would stay in, and kind of played on the same theme that the hot springs community was doing at the time. As an alternative to hot springs, you could come to Three Sisters. And he also bottled the water and shipped it around the world as well, or put it in kegs. Yeah.
Well, and for in kegs for those of us that came after, it was such an incredible facility. I mean, number one, it is pristinely beautiful there, but it doesn't grow much. But if you can get there, and I like the water. We'll talk about the water in a minute. But so were these some of the cabins, James?
Correct. These were the cabins that were on site in the 1940s when the Corps purchased the land from the resort and took it over. And because it had these cabins, it had these structures on it. Keep in mind, the Army Corps of Engineers is Department of Defense, the Army, and they're not in the tourism business. And so they felt the state park system, and that's why we're located where we are, would be in a better position to preserve the history and around the springs. And so that's why we're located where we are, and because of the springs, and that we're in a better position to care for those than some of the private contractors. What the Corps does, what the Army does, is they contract out land to Brady Mountain or Crystal Springs or Mountain Harbor to handle those tourism requirements on the lake. And so that's why the state park is where we are, is because of the springs.
So is that kind of the origin story of how we got the Lake Ouachita State Park?
That is, yes. We became a state park, and actually in 1955, when they were just opening the lake to the public, they leased 360 acres to the state park. All of the state park is still on Corps land, but we get a lease, basically a 30-year lease for $1. Every 30 years they just renew it for $1. But we're here because of the springs.
Well, and let me make note. You brought up Blakely Mountain or Brady Mountain and Shangri-La, some of those other places. These are other private vendors that have nice places on the lake, but they typically have a 99-year lease, and it's not $1 most times. It's significant money. Is that true?
Well, I don't know that it's a 99-year. I don't know how their leases are structured, but from my understanding, they pay a percentage of their gross. So like 10% or 20% of their gross goes to the government as for use of the land. But it's a nice way to keep the area pristine, because if you're a concessionaire and you build $1 million resort on federal land and then you don't follow the rules, they can say, well, thank you for this resort. You built this on our land.
It's a
we're going to now give it to somebody else. Yeah.
It was a wonderful donation. Thank you. Right.
So it's a big incentive for them to stay in compliance, and us too. We try to follow their rules and regulations as well.
Well, and once again, the 5 Mile High View, for those that haven't grown up in Benton, if you know what I mean, the area around all these lakes, the lake is completely protected. Now there is some grandfathering in, but at the same time, it's not designed for the Lake Ouachita to ever be built out. It's supposed to be basically wild and free, right?
That is correct. The Corps owns to the 610 elevation, 610 feet above sea level, which is roughly the 40 or 50 feet, maybe 100 feet inside the tree line, all the way around the lake. So you can't have like front property, but there are some small places to get like views or something like that. But it's almost 90% or even more surrounded by the national forest. So you have the Ouachita National Forest and the Corps of Engineers, which are both federal agencies, preserving this natural area for many, many generations to come.
Well, we've got a picture of the spring house, and this is obviously not the one that's there today, but I want to have the discussion when we get a second. Tell me more about the spring house, but then I want to hear about, and I'd ask you about this when you were with Scotty Mack. I called in and asked, can you drink the water or not, and why does it have the warnings and all that stuff? I wanted to hear those stories for our guest.
Sure. Well, this is a historical picture of the springs, what it looked like in the 1940s. Today, it looks a lot different. We put up a new spring house that we used to use it as a water source for the park. And the newer spring house that was put in the 70s was a holding tank for some of the spring water that we could then use throughout the park. Since that time, because of regulations dealing with drinking water and stuff, we've gone to North Garland County. So the park uses North Garland County as our water supply. But that was part of the reasons when we have to put a plaque up at the springs that say it's not potable, because the Freshwater Drinking Act of 1991, I believe it was, says that if you're a government agency or any agency it provides water to the public, it has to be treated. And so since we don't treat the springs, we can't claim them to be potable. But they're coming right out of the ground. At least, at least they're contaminated in the 2 or 3 feet they get to the trough. They're probably pretty safe.
So, and because I didn't realize it was the water supply, which only made sense. I mean, you got a spring, why wouldn't you use it for the water supply? But I'm going to read between the lines here. As a private individual, knowing it doesn't have chlorine or fluoride in or whatever, there's no reason I can't just stick a bucket under number 1 and get some of number 3. And supposedly at the time, each one of these was for a different cure. Is that correct?
That's correct. Different ones would help with everything from your liver to your kidneys to your digestive system. They have different iron and mineral contents in each one. And we have some plaques that show what the testing has revealed, some of those back in the day. But yes, and people come and draw water from the springs. They, even in August, they're flowing pretty strong, and it's cold water as well. So lots of people come and dip water and pour it over their heads and all sorts of stuff.
That was the place where it used to be. There was the state park headquarters was there, and there was a restaurant and all kinds of things. And there were other houses that were still there, I recall, back in the 80s. And a wonderful area. But if it's a super hot summer August day and you're down at where it was the swim beach, and there is a swim beach there, but and you're burning up, it's a great way to come put your head under 1, 2, or 3 and cool off, right?
That's correct. You bet. We actually had toyed with the ideal of channeling those to like a holding pool near the beach area where people could, jump in and stuff. But then we thought, no, that would be a management nightmare, because people would fight over the little pool we made, catching the spring water. But it just flows right out of the springs and down into the lake, and people still come enjoy that.
And this is the kid in me, but I remember, I guess it's been 30 years ago. I remember that the water that comes out of the 3 springs goes across into a little creek across the way and then runs down behind the beach. And I always wanted to play Corps of Engineers director. Well, let's block it here and make it dam here. And anyway, I digress. So here's what the springs look like today, right?
Correct. And you can see there's 3 separate troughs there. There are plaques that show which numbers they are, and you can follow not in that photo, but you can see which ones are coming out. And they flow just like that 24/7, just nice steady streams of water. Again, back in the day when it was part of our drinking source, just to the left of this photo, there was little places where you could fill your jugs and stuff when we could do that. But still, people use it today for that purpose. And we try to keep it clean and move all the leaves and debris that blow in from here from time to time.
And there's a beautiful little building there that protects the springs. It's not like they're open to the elements or whatever. Just a quick question. When McFadden showed up, were these 3 springs literally just right in the ground beside each other, and he just happened to notice that they taste a little different?
I think so. We don't know much about McFadden. The best records we have is when Mr. Whipple took over the property in the early 1900s. But from my understanding, it was just a steady stream. And of course, this was all forest. The lake wasn't there. It was just a forested area. And here are these springs coming up out of the ground. And so it made a great place to build a home.
Unbelievable. And for those that haven't been to Blakely Mountain, and I'm blowing this up for us just a little, back in the, I guess it would be the early 90s, the dam building was open, the powerhouse building was open, and I went and knocked on the door one time, and the most generous and gracious people, that had wonderful black and white photos like this on the wall about when this dam was being built, but they offered to take me on a tour, and it was one of the highlights of my life. I thought it was one of the most amazing places I'd ever been in my life.
Yeah, I got to go tour it again. I've been in it several times, but went with we had a team working on the trails this winter on an AmeriCorps team, and we went there in January and toured it. And that technology was put in the early 50s, 1955 when it was dedicated. Still working today, still operational. It's just, people don't realize when they drive by the dam that building actually is about 6 stories underground. You're only seeing the upper 2 stories, and so it's a pretty impressive structure.
Well, and once again, this is run by Entergy, so they, in coordination with the Corps of Engineers, manage these water levels, right?
Correct. What energy does is they control the 2 lower lakes from this power plant. So
Oh,
we generate power when we let water out and it goes into Lake Hamilton. But Lake Hamilton, see, we're 48,000 acres. Lake Hamilton is only 7,000 acres, and Lake Catherine is only 2,000 acres. So
really?
yeah, so think of us as being I always say, think of us as being a 7-Eleven Big Gulp. Then below us is Lake Hamilton. It's a coffee cup. Then below that, Lake Catherine's a Dixie cup. So if
I
you
got it.
drop us an inch, you raise Lake Catherine, several feet in proportion. So we have to drop or we have to control that level of flow slowly. So the power plant at Blakely controls the lower lakes and monitors that flow rate so they can lower the lakes or have that water pass through the system efficiently.
Well, when I asked one of the gentlemen there, I said, "So, okay, let me get this in perspective. Like Redfield, which is a coal-fired plant, burning coal and gas, all owned by Entergy, also, is 850 megawatts, and this little facility is 88 megawatts." And I'm like, "Why?" It's a drop in the bucket, respectively, of what a big plant can do. And the gentleman turned to me and he said, "Yes, but we can go from 0 to 88 megawatts in 25 seconds." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh." Oh, and he said, when we do that, the walls of these 3 feet thick concrete walls will shake, but we could do that if we had to. Uh, it's an amazing thing. It's one of those things you had never had any idea that how it worked until you heard it, if you know what I mean.
Yes, the analogy that when I was speaking with them, and I'll simplify the terms, but let's say that the Arkansas power grid needs 100 units of electricity, and a coal power plant like Redfield says can generate 25. And so you get 4 of those guys going, and you got 100 units, and everything's great. But now it's August and it's 115 degrees outside, and everybody's turning on their air conditioners, and you need an extra 10 units. Well, you can't get another coal power plant going because it takes days for their boilers to go up and all that kind of stuff. But you can call the guys at Blakely Mountain Dam and say, "Hey, I need your 10 units." And they can throw a switch and within 5 or 10 minutes be dumping that power onto the grid. And then let's say it's midnight, everybody turns their air conditioners off, and you want to take those units away from the grid. They can throw a switch, and now they're back off the grid. So they're like a throttle within the power grid. They apply power when needed at peak times.
Well, James, I know you go back as far as I do on this. One of the things that is always amazing to me is that Ouachita is basically the reservoir that stops the rest of the place from flooding. I mean, you and I both know there were times when I've seen the water up looking like it was about to get into the restaurant at Three Sisters Beach. Unbelievably high water, and that's all the way around 48,000 acres of shoreline, right? I mean, tremendous amount of water. Hot Springs and Catherine wouldn't have stood a chance, right?
Correct. We're here's the spillway here. If the lake ever reaches 592 feet above sea level, it would go out this natural spillway just past or just before the dam and into Lake Hamilton. It's never reached that level. It got close in 1982. It got to 591, but never got to 592. Anytime we're above 578 feet above sea level, they have to drop water to meet the purpose for the lake was for flood control and hydroelectric power. So to meet its purpose of flood control, it catches all the water in the spring. And we're actually May 1st today is usually normally we're at about 580 to about 585 above sea level. I didn't check our lake level today, but I'm guessing we're at about 578 to
Mm.
579. We're probably just above normal pool with the rain that we've been receiving. And then we'll slowly drop throughout the year. So it's interesting the way our lake levels change with our seasons and they've got it down to fine science to use that to our advantage for power generation.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, what we had this last week, we had roughly 3 inches in some areas, and I mean 3 inches. I'm on Lake DeSoto here, 210 acres. We're a thimble compared to any of these, right? But to watch our lake rise 6 inches, not that uncommon. It'll happen, but to watch 3 inches of rain, what's the watershed of Lake Ouachita? It's got to be what,
Well,
100,000 acres, I guess.
yeah, I'm not sure. It comes in from Oklahoma, but we rise and fall 20 feet throughout the year. We'll get it. Yeah, we'll get as high as 580 to 585, somewhere in that range, and we'll drop as low as 560 to 565 in the low end. So we're usually somewhere between 585 and 565, somewhere floating
And
in.
for those that do or don't know, and I want to be very specific here, you can drive down past Mountain Pine School, beautiful little school, go through a picture perfect park area, drive under Blakely Mountain, and you think, okay, well, we've seen Blakely Mountain, and that must be what we're looking at here. No, no, no. I've heard people refer to this, and correct me if I'm wrong, James. This, what we're looking at now, is basically the emergency spillway if it ever gets to big levels, which just a little bit, was that northwest of the dam?
I believe so. Yes, as you drive into Spillway, I think you'll see this on the left or right side there. I think that's where that photo is taken.
And this is
included
19.
the photo of the tunnel. What's interesting about Ouachita is it doesn't have spillways. It doesn't go over the top of the dam. It actually goes underneath the dam. Yeah, there's a 25-foot tunnel, reinforced steel tunnel underneath the dam that allows the water to pass under it rather than over the top, which was interesting.
It's fascinating. It really, and this is 1950s technology, right?
Correct.
Boy, so
here,
if you were gonna build a lake, James, wouldn't you need to cut some trees, maybe?
correct, and that's what this photo is showing, is the boat that they used back then had a little V in it. They would just pull up. What they did is they raised the lake. The lake's deepest part's around 200 feet. So they let the water rise for 2 or 3 years up to about 100 feet above the old river channel. And then they started clearing timber using this boat for the next 200 feet up, so that there wouldn't be any boating hazards in the main channels of the lake. Now, on the northern side of the lake, certain areas, there are some stumps that are protruding, especially when we're in the low levels around the 60s. So that, or 560 level. But that's what that's showing there. Yeah, they didn't doze, they didn't dig. All of the lake that you see today is all natural. So the islands at one time were hilltops. The peninsulas at one time were a ridge. And so you have this very intricate layout of the land that has got water in it now.
And wildly irregular, frankly. And by the way, I want to just to throw out real quick, the visitor center now at Lake Ouachita State Park, I think, is fascinating. Do you still have the big rattlesnake skins that you had?
I don't think so. We've got an otter and some other things. We're actually renovating this building this year. We're going to renovate it and update its exhibits and its appearance and everything. It's about a 35-year-old building. Well, the original building was in the 70s, but hasn't been touched for 35 years. So we're going to try to update it this year.
And they still have great burgers there, people. I'm just letting you know. I wanted to make note. The reason I was asking about the rattlesnake skins and so forth is because I don't think people even had the vaguest clue of how wild this area was. Is that fair to say?
Correct. People in the village now know that we have bears, and I was playing some pickleball the last week, and we were talking about mountain lions. Someone was knew that worked for the park and was asking about mountain lions and some of the pictures and stuff that are out there. So the area is very, very wild. It's turkey season. People are out, turkeys, deer. Our raccoons are pretty aggressive here in the park. We have lots of raccoons. So lots of neat wildlife throughout the area.
Absolutely beautiful. And so, James, and I want to come up to another screen here real quick. What an amazing shot. And people ask me, and I'm not making this up, we have people from around the world ask us on the podcast, is it really that pretty? I mean, is that photoshopped? I'm like, it looks like this, people. It really does.
and that's a big draw for the state and for the region, to have these great views of the lake and this pristine shoreline all the way around the lake. So people are just amazed when they come out and go on a lake tour. We recommend those because the best way to appreciate and see the size and scope of this lake is from the lake. So to get out on the lake and to go along the shoreline or to stop on an island and skip some rocks, those are memories that you'll keep with you forever.
It really is. And by the way, excellent slate for skipping rocks. I'm just giving you an inside tip there, people. James, I want to come back. You have been more than gracious, and it's only taken us 35 minutes to go through the entire back history. But now tell me about Lake Ouachita State Park. I mean, you have a marina. I mean, tell me all the details.
Sure, we're a full service state park. We're in the top 10 as far as we have 52 state parks in Arkansas, but we're in one of the top 10 slots. We have housekeeping cabins. We have 8 of those. We have roughly 100 campsites, some with hookups of electric, water, sewer, some without. We have hiking trails. The Caddo Bend Trail, which this photo is off of, is our main hiking trail. We have a full service marina where we have slip rentals, and then we also have party barge rentals and fishing boat rentals, canoes and kayaks. And then we have a very extensive interpretive program where we do lake tours. We go out to see the purple martins in the summer that are wintering or visiting the lake. We do overnight kayaking trips. During the eclipse, we had some astronomers from NASA come out and do some night programs with us. So we have lots of activities going on. The master naturalists with the village are very active here as well. So lots of activities here at the park, and it's just a great place. If you've got people visiting and they want to get out on the lake, we do tours every week, every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 2:00. We're almost always running a tour, and you just call us up and say, "Hey, we want to go," and we'll get you signed up.
James, I really, you know my heart about this. What an incredible asset. We see billions and even trillions of dollars spent, and I'm like, yeah, can we have more state parks like this? Because this is a gem, really.
Sure. And I always like, as a manager of the park, parks aren't designed to make money necessarily, but we don't charge to get into our parks. And what money we do make basically breaks even. So we really don't cost the taxpayers anything. We've generated just as much as we. So that's a nice thing through our camping and other facilities that we have here. So we try to provide a good product. The one thing that I see on Google more than anything is clean restrooms. More people comment about the restrooms than anything else, but we do have a great staff. They keep the grass mowed. They keep the restrooms clean. If you're one of the lucky people that gets in, because we are pretty busy and it's hard to get a reservation here sometimes, you get a great experience. You get a great lake. You get a great vacation, and we're happy to host you.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't know about bathrooms that much, but I don't think they clean themselves. I think they need assistance sometimes. Is that right?
Yeah, we have a housekeeping staff, and even, sometimes we even pitch in and take care of those. But we have volunteers too that help with the campground, and they don't really clean the restrooms, but they help us keep an eye on everything. And most people are very respectful of parks. I like that about Arkansas, is everybody's very respectful and typically take good care of the park, clean up after them and themselves and that kind of thing.
Communal sense of ownership, if that's fair.
Correct.
I wanted to make note. Here's the subject of this entire discussion, which I think has been fascinating, and I appreciate your time. We don't need any now, but occasionally you could use some volunteers. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have some of the master naturalists are helping with an Ozark chickapin project where we're trying to reintroduce the Ozark chickapin into the area. So we're planting some small trees to get them reestablished. They're more like a chestnut that was wiped out, and we're reintroducing them into the ecosystem. They're very good for wildlife. But we also hire people. We hire for seasonal staff. We hire front desk and maintenance and marina staff. And so if someone's retired to the village, but they still want to work a little bit, maybe a couple of days a week, I always encourage them to reach out to me. I'll put you in my file. And if I have an opening, I've got several folks that work for me that are like that in the village. They work at my marina. They work here at the visitor center. And they're just a great asset because they like engaging with people from all around the world. They like, having a great backdrop to work in and that kind of thing.
And let me tell you about villagers. They show up when they say they're going to.
That's true. That's true. We're doing some interviews for our visitor center positions this summer, actually this afternoon. So, and that's answering the phone and taking reservations and telling people where the hiking trail is and that kind of thing.
Well, James, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
Would you come back with us sometime?
Absolutely. Yes. I've enjoyed my career with state parks. You bet.
Oh, and I'm sorry. I meant to ask, how did a boy from Benton get to Lake Ouachita State Park?
Well, my dad had good advice for me when I went to college, which is in Clarksville, Arkansas. I went to a small Presbyterian college there, and he said it doesn't matter what you study, you won't end up doing it anyway. He said get a degree and do it in 4 years because that's all I'm paying for. And so I studied government. I started doing this part-time in the summers, and summers ran out, and so I just kept doing it. And my wife supports me, so I can keep my fun job. And so here I am 34 years later, running a state park.
So she brings in the income and you have the play job. Is that how this works?
Right. She worked for the Forest Service for many years. She recently retired and is pressuring me to retire too, but I enjoy what I do. I'm going to stick around a little bit longer.
Listen to her. Don't listen to her. For Hot Springs Village Inside Out, I'm Dennis Simpson. He's James Wilborn. Thanks, James, for joining us.
Thank you, Dennis. You bet.
Thanks for watching and listening to Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a weekly podcast starring Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Visit the website at hotspringsvillageinsideout.com.